And so what gave you guys the confidence or the cojones to just close on a package of 9 without ever being there, without ever seeing it, without ever truly knowing, like you don't know anyone on your team, you've never seen them, right? Like that takes something.
Okay, so here's how it breaks down. In June, Cade and I were outside of Keller Williams Fresno, and we were making the decision that you have to make risk, or you have to take risks to make money. And so we decided California's out. We are going to make an investment out of state before the end of the year. And so we said, let's do it. The following day, for the next 5 weeks, we came in early and we spent an hour and a half a day every weekday until we closed. We were doing research. So right there, we put in like 25 hours of research of not only figuring out what we needed to do. We sat down with Jason, somebody who's done it before that we already trusted. We sat down with our property manager that we were going to be using. We had some tough conversations there. We interviewed multiple real estate.
Elaborate on those tough conversations.
We brought up what happens if the tenant doesn't pay, what happens if they start failing at their job. We brought up what happens if she passes away or if she wants to retire. We talked about pricing and we negotiated on pricing with her. You know, it's
so
hard.
Talk about those 4 conversations, dude. Okay. So what happens if she dies? What happens if they don't pay? You don't have to share your rate, and that might be.
No, we're more than happy to. So we pay 10%. The reason why we pay 10% is because competition in the area, they average between 8 and 10. The people that were doing 8 had not very good records, and they weren't providing as much service. The 10 we decided was worth paying because we were getting great service. So there's certain terms, like we get paid directly by the renter. She invoices us and we pay her property manager fee from our account. So she doesn't hold our rent and take it directly out. She's actually a bookkeeper for us, and she's been doing my books for 2 years. So she offered to start paying all of our private lending. She runs all of our rehabs. She manages all of our P&Ls and balance sheets, which we just took to my CPA like 2 days ago, and he was blown away at how organized and how well it was all done. So that's huge to us. That's 2%.
That's massive. I still need to get more organized with this.
That part is huge, and she does all of that for us. So conversations like what happens if she wants to retire, passes away. So she has a team in Fresno. They are Fresno located, and they run throughout all of the United States. She travels between the different locations. The biggest thing that we found is that if she decides that she wants to retire or something happens, she has an entire team that's already set to run without her. She right now is the key piece, but she has all the components there, and she has other people that can quickly fill in that position. So that was the big key to us. And then ultimately, like going back to the very start, it's like, how do we trust that she's going to know what she's doing? She provided us with a whole bunch of different documents for Jason. We got his permission, and she kind of helped show us how that looked like. And so we could kind of see what that looked like already. And she was explaining, like, this is the process, and these are the contingencies, and here's how you can tell if we're doing what we need to do. We also I talked on the phone with Brad Hardy for an hour and a half on what questions to ask a property manager. He's a local, super successful property manager.
Mega successful property.
Yeah. He loaded me with some solid questions. And so I ran those off to her, and she gave me some solid answers. But back to the original question, why, like, how did we have the cojones to close on it? We were super confident in our research because we hit every different aspect as many times as possible. And then 2, we knew that the worst case scenario, we were buying at such a steep discount in the market that we could get out of these properties through multiple different exit strategies. So we didn't have to keep them as rentals. We could have flipped them. We could have wholesaled them.
Okay.
That's what I think was probably one of the biggest, if not the key part. And this was the biggest thing that Jason pushed us to sit down and do, was sit down and run through every single worst possible scenario that could happen with these things, right? With the properties themselves. Yep. When we go to refinance, if the refinances come in completely below, for whatever reason, come in completely below market value, and now we're stuck, having to repay back, a decent amount of private money,
$262,000,
which is no small amount for a 21 and 22-year-old having, 200 plus grand out in debt, right?
Yep.
So it was sitting down, running
at a high interest rate.
Yeah, at a high interest. It was us.
Interest only.
Yeah, it was us sitting down, running through that, coming up with solutions, and just being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
that's it.
We spent a lot of time focusing on what could go wrong, and especially in the partnership, like what happens if, like one of the conversations, like what happens if one of us dies? What happens if one of us goes into debt and we need to sell a house because we can't even afford our bills? Like what is that?
What happens in those situations? I think for me and Kyle, we have a couple of different exits as far as my partnership with owning houses with someone else.
Yeah, so we have options to buy out each other. So like if you can, we can buy each other out. We've also agreed that in certain circumstances, we're open to selling certain properties. If one person needs to and the other person doesn't, we have a couple different strategies on what could happen there. The biggest thing to us was really our biggest fear was what happens if we can't refinance, or what happens if the second part of this process goes wrong. And we scrounged together. We literally counted up every dollar bill that the two of us have in its entirety. I mean, I'm talking all the way down to like I had $1.62. I had $1.62 in one account, and we even counted like that account. And we went through everything, and we said, what is the worst case scenario? Can we afford to get out of this? And we could. And we were like, okay, great.
Okay. And